There is so much more happening in the invisible. We are perceiving a tiny fraction of this great sacred mystery, maybe 0.005% of the total perceptual possibilities at any given time. And that's what's creating our reality. So what happens when we expand our aperture of perception? Beyond the mechanistic, reductionist worldview of Newtonian physics and linear causation, we remember who we really are and what we're really here to do. And as the leaders our future needs, we can choose to activate the ancient intelligence in our living DNA, not synthetic or artificial. By stepping out of old programs, identities, and indoctrinations, we will remember how to master our multidimensionality, working with frequencies, living systems, earth energies, and the cosmos. When I graduated college, I became a tree sitter. I didn't know what that was either. In 1996, I moved from New York to California, and I saw the ancient redwood trees for the first time. I got out of my car, hiked into this ancient grove, and I stood there in awe among the ancients. And I heard them say, "We need your help." I didn't really understand that, but I had to get back on the road. So I'm pulling out of the parking lot, and a giant logging truck speeds by with a chunk of a giant ancient tree. And I followed it around a few bends, and there I saw for the first time bald, bleeding, clear-cut mountains. And my assignment made sense. About a year later, I found myself with a group of activists on a full moon in October. We named ourselves the Lunatics, and we set out hunting for ancient trees marked to be cut. And there she stood, 2,000-year-old mother reaching up to the sky with a blue paint mark around her massive girth. We named her Luna, and the tree sit began. As tree sitters, we built platforms high up in these trees, and we lived in them so they couldn't be logged. And one day, I was about 280 feet up on this platform in the tree we called Luna, and I heard logging somewhere else below on the mountain. You could feel the anxiety. The trees were communicating. They were talking. And they cried. The trees cried sap, literally oozing sap for their brethren down the mountain. And that night, while I was up in that tree we called Luna, I heard that voice again.
You can harness the ancient intelligence from the trees, but we must not be cut.
And that was not going to be the last time I heard that. About a year later, my friend who was in that tree with me, David Gypsy Chain, was killed by a logger in the woods. And I became a lawyer, seeking justice for Gypsy and to end the destruction of these ancient places and people, because I knew that one day we would realize that we would need to access their intelligence to remember ours. And then I burned out on activism. In 2005, I took a job in corporate litigation on the defense side in Midtown Manhattan. Cognitive dissonance, yeah. And to top it off, I was assigned to a big pharma case where they were negligently administering trials overseas and killing babies. Hell no. I stood up, I walked out of that conference room, and I went up to the mountains to a yoga retreat to find myself. And instead, I had a car accident, which resulted in a head injury and a concussion that lasted for 2.5 years. Got back to the city, found a neurologist, and guess what she prescribed me? The drug that was killing babies. The oracles of synchronicity spoke loud and clear. This is not who you are. A few years later, I was still in immense pain, and I was ready to end my life. And I opted for a trip to Ecuador with a group of herbalists. We were traveling around the country, learning from different healers. And the last minute, we got an invitation, and the next thing we know, we're 4 hours into an 8-hour journey up a windy jungle river in the Amazon, and we entered this mythical vortex. Everything was giant, glowing, and alive. And we arrived at this village where we were greeted by a humble Ashuar medicine man. Don Juan. And he apologized profusely. He couldn't sit with us and teach us as planned. He had sick people he had to heal in the village. And so he invited us to sit around the periphery of the Maloka, the healing hut. And he's healing people all night long. And in the middle of the night, he looks at me and he comes over. He did that 3 times. Nobody told him about the concussion. Yet there, under a billion twinkling stars, in this symphony of jungle songs, I received that healing, and the concussion was gone. In the morning, the community sat us down and told us that Ecuador had just sold this land to a Canadian mining company. We were sitting on the largest copper reserve in the equatorial belt. The place is now a copper mine, and they were removed, forcibly removed. And Don Juan came to me for 4 years, telling me a lot of things in my dreams, including that he would work with the ground and the sky, the copper and the cosmos in his healings, and that one day we would remember how to harness the frequency from the copper without extracting it. Again, 6 years after that, in 2018, I'm back in Ecuador. This time I was in a place called Yasuni National Reserve. This area had just been opened up for oil exploitation by the government. And we were staying at a biological reserve, an island of pristine jungle surrounded by oil encampments, methane flares, and loud generators. And we went for a hike in this gorgeous jungle, and there she stood, this beautiful kapok tree reaching up to the sky with giant undulating roots above ground. And she told me, I heard her say, step in. So I stepped in, and I couldn't move. All of a sudden, I felt like she zipped me back and was downloading information into my spine. And she said,
The oil needs to stay in the ground here. It calibrates the frequencies for this living system.
and I felt the oil. I could feel it rushing underneath the ground there. And then she said,
You can harness the frequencies from oil without extracting it. Energy is free.
and then again in 2023, I was in Colombia visiting with the Kogi people, an ancient civilization. They're so connected. And their mamos are their shamans, their spiritual leaders. And I said to Mamo Alejandro, what is your vision for the future? And among other things, he said, the coal needs to stay in the ground here. It's not about carbon in the atmosphere. The coal is balancing the electromagnetic waves under the ground here. And that we will remember how to harness the frequency of coal without extracting it. And he said, as we're extracting the organs of the mother, she's shriveling up. And if we don't wake up now, it's human extinction in 15 years. The ancient trees, the copper, the oil, the coal, it's clear there's a message to convey. So as the leaders our future needs, the wayfinders at the bow of the ship, what if we can harness these frequencies without extracting them? We can when we expand our aperture of perception about who we think we are and what we're really here to do.